Today's topic will be more on the lighter side of things. It's something I've been asked about a few times, but I never really found the time to do a quick video on it. As I don't have that much time today, I feel like it's an appropriate topic for this day. The topic is, how often should you recall? Now, this topic is something that mostly concerns Conquest in my opinion, as in other modes you will often not have to recall as much because they just work differently. For example, in Arena, recalling is just a very essential part of what you're doing. You go into a fight and then you back out real quick and come back because it's not much of a time difference. Whereas in Conquest it actually makes a huge difference. If you're not in the right place at the right time, then it can be very problematic for your team depending on what the situation is. So, what factors in when it comes to recalling? First of all, your health. If you're low health, then most situations indicate that you should probably back. That's not always the case. If you're, for example, a jungler and you have at least Bombas Mask and maybe even some other sustain in your kit, and you're only low on health but not on mana, then you can consider just going into the back of the jungle and healing up even from very low health, as long as you're able to still clear a camp or at least some minions to heal up on them. This is something that should be considered in a risk-reward context. So, for example, if I'm low health after a fight and there's a Thanatos on the enemy team and I don't know where that Thanatos is, I'm probably still better off backing just to be safe. Whereas if I'm low after a fight, but the enemy lost as many players as I did, and you're not expecting anyone to invade the back harpies, then you can go into that area and heal up and then maybe keep on farming. But the question is there any benefit in doing so? For example, if you're already on 2000 gold, you could very well go back and buy nearly a full item and then just benefit from that item as well and come back, and the extra time that you would spend walking towards the lane would still be kind of well spent because of the benefit you could have in fights after that. If you only had 500 gold to begin with after the fight, then it makes a lot more sense to try and stay and sustain up. And that obviously brings us to the second part, which is items. Items are a very strong indicator of when you should back. If you have the chance to finish a full item, it's almost always beneficial to back because this full item will usually have a very strong impact on the game, especially with the passives that most items have and so on. But even tier 1, tier 2 items can be impactful, especially tier 2 items, when you think of the early game. For jungler, even having tier 2 boots will have a major impact on their movement speed and their damage, and can really get you ahead in power curve of the enemy jungler. And having that extra movement speed will also mean that while you lose a bit of time, you will also gain time that you would have otherwise lost by walking around with your tier 1 boots. Similarly, for gods that have stacking items, it's very important to get those done as early as possible, and obviously you should back as soon as you can finish that. Hunters are basically very much the definition of how this works. A hunter will almost always back when he gets a full item, just so he can stay ahead or even in the power curve. And as such, that's probably the best way to learn when to back efficiently. Then obviously there are situations where you just have to back and it's not beneficial, simply because you got low and the enemy has a lead on you. This is something that should be very obvious, and what you should not be doing is overstaying. Like, sure, if you know that you can somehow take a trade and you can bait someone with low health because you have a teammate on, for example, you have a god that's just very good at that, then you can stay. For example, if you're low-key in solo and you're expecting the enemy to dive tower to kill you, but you still have your ult while you're low, then that's something where you could be very safe while it looks like you're in a dangerous situation. But for most gods, that's not the case too often, and I way more often see people overstaying than backing too early. Sure, if you play on a very high level and you're very confident in your skill and know when you should back exactly and when you can bait out, then you can definitely stay, but then you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So as such, it makes a lot more sense to just take the safe path and back before you regret it, and especially because if your teammates see it, it may lead to some sort of BM because you didn't back earlier. Especially for solo laners, this often means that you back at the same time as the enemy solo laner. This doesn't have to be the case. If you can get an extra wave and get an advantage that way by pushing the wave into tower or get some elementals or something like that, you should definitely do that, just in order to get that little lead that the enemy lost by backing. But often enough, that will not be the case. Nothing will be up when the enemy backs, and you're well off backing as well, as long as you have your teleport at the same time. So you just match him in your item build and how far you are into your item build. When it comes to defending towers, it's a question of it being worth it or not. If you're just staying to save a tower, but you have 300 health and you think the tower is most likely gonna fall, then maybe you should just let the tower fall and back. If you think that you can protect the tower, for example, either through a strong ultimate or because your teammates are nearby and you just hold a little longer, it can be worth sacrificing yourself for that tower. But generally speaking, in most situations, I feel like many people try to defend towers that are already lost and sacrifice their lives instead of just backing, accepting that the tower is gone, and then just trying to play better from that point on. Similarly, a lot of supports don't seem to back as often as they should and could be. Simply because for a support it's rather easy to know when he should back, and this is because a support will often have to ward. And if your wards run out, then you should probably have backed at that point to get new wards, or at least around that time. You can't always have the wards up 100%, but if you wait for 30 seconds after the ward has run out, then you better have a good reason to do so. If you consider all these points, and it very much comes down to more of a specific situation than a specific time. So it's not like you could say you have to back every 3 minutes or something like that. It very much depends on the conditions, which character you're playing, which role you're playing, and what your purpose is, but also if it's worth staying. And getting this feeling for value is something that takes time, just being right on estimating when it's important to back and when it's not. The tips I gave you here, the points that you have to keep in mind, will help you understand when you should back, around what times, but they can't just perfectly illustrate for you. Another advice that I can give in that regard is watch pro players of the role that you want to play, because they have very good backing time as they time their backing as ideal as possible, and seeing when they do it will also give you a more natural feel of when you should do it. With that, thank you guys for watching. I hope this gave you some more insight on that topic. Also, I'll be doing a drunk stream with PunkDuck, Sexy Rexy, Trally Rally, and Mesmerize over on Twitch TV/DukeSloth today. It should be starting shortly after this video comes up, so if you want to stop by there and say hi, feel free to do so. Other than that, if you enjoyed this and you're not subbed yet, feel free to click that sub button. I hope to see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.